Welcome, friends, to another Wolff Responds. I want to respond today to last night's State of the Union message from President Donald Trump. I want to focus on two major issues where he could have and should have been an honest presenter, as a good leader would, of the problems we face as a nation and of whatever plans he has for solving those problems. He didn't do that, and so I'm going to try to do that in these few minutes that I have with you. So I want to talk about two topics. The first one is the massive firing of government employees that is underway by Mr. Trump and by his, what can we call him, assistant, Mr. Musk. And the second topic will be the disintegration of the relationship between the United States and its major allies in Europe and Canada and Mexico. So let's begin with the firing of all these public employees. The language used is phony. This is not about efficiency, and it never was. Efficiency is what hustlers use when they want you to be distracted from what's actually going on. Employers fire employees and tell them, well, it's nothing personal. Oh, it's not about profit. It's about being efficient. Sure it is. Let me give you an example of the efficiency that we see. I'm going to take simply one example. Easy, the Internal Revenue Service, the people who collect taxes from us all in this country. About 70,000 people. Wow. 10% of them, or 7,000, have already been fired. And the plans currently publicly listed are for 50%, half of the remaining folks, 30,000 or more, to be fired. When you fire 50 to 60% of people in a short amount of time, you're not becoming efficient. You're just taking a meat cleaver to the process. Efficient would require you to go through job after job, see what is really necessary, what isn't, what could be solved by moving a person from one kind of work to another, from one location to another. Yeah, we know what it means to go through a job situation to make things more efficient. That's not what's being done. You couldn't do that in a matter of weeks, which is what we're talking about. So what we're seeing is something else. And here's what the president should have told you. Back in 2017, during the first presidency of Trump, he gave corporations and the rich one of the biggest tax cuts in American history. Huge, huge. But to get it through the Congress, to give this gift to corporations and the rich, by the way, at the end of 30 years of American history, when we had been redistributing wealth and income from the poor and the middle to the folks at the top, when the people at the top never needed a tax cut less than they needed it in 2017, Mr. Trump gave it to them anyway. But to get it through Congress, he had to append a clause saying that these extraordinary tax cuts for the rich would expire in the year 2025, this year. And now, if they expired, the corporations and the rich would have to go back to paying significant taxes that they haven't paid since 2017. And they don't want to. And Mr. Trump has promised them they won't have to. Well, if they don't raise those taxes, then the government would have to borrow trillions, as it has been doing for some years now. And Mr. Trump wants to appear to be the one who doesn't borrow the way the others did. So he can say, look at me, I'm not borrowing. And how is he going to do that? By taking a meat cleaver to the public employees, cutting out their jobs, cutting out their budgets, closing their offices, closing their activities. This is not about efficiency. This is a political game to make Mr. Trump look good to the billionaires he knows he needs to please to keep his game, his position, and his power going. Don't be fooled. Let me turn next to the extraordinary events that were referred to in the speech, but we've all been following. The destruction of the alliance the United States used to have, an alliance very close with what are called the G7, the group of seven: Japan, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy, with Mexico a close second. This alliance is now disintegrating. And the president ought to have talked about why that's happening, what problems it presents, and what he's going to do, instead of prancing around like he's Mr. Tough Guy, putting America first, as if our previous presidents didn't try to do that as well. Here we go. Everything about our alliance starts at the end of World War II. It'll take me a moment, but I think you'll see the importance. At the end of World War II, 1945, the United States was the only combating country left standing. Other than Pearl Harbor, no bombs fell in the United States. Contrary to a destroyed economy in Britain, in France, in Germany, in Russia, you name it, in all the potential competitors, they were ruined. The United States emerged dominant militarily, dominant politically, dominant economically. The US dollar became the world's currency. We were on top of the hill. There were problems. Our ally in fighting the German Nazis was the Soviet Union. And we were now scared of them, so we converted them from ally into enemy. In Europe, much closer to Russia than we are, much closer to the Soviet Union than we were, there had been a powerful growth of the communist and socialist movements and political parties in all European countries. Why? Because they were the backbone of the anti-Nazi, anti-fascistic resistance. The second most important political party in Italy after the war was the Communist Party of Italy. In the first parliament Charles de Gaulle had post-war France, several cabinet positions were given to the French Communist Party. And the United States was freaked out by Russia, now the great other, and freaked out by how close to revolutionary change much of Europe was. I'm talking about Western Europe. Eastern Europe was already part of what we call then the Soviet bloc. So the United States, being the big, powerful one, took over. It created not a demobilization of the war that was now over, World War II, but the opposite, a growth in our military so that we became the overwhelmingly dominant military power in the world, which we have been ever since. So strong was the United States that it basically said to Western Europe, here's a deal. We're going to make an alliance. We're going to call it NATO. And in that alliance, we're going to be the dominant military force. You don't have to have a serious army because we'll take care of that for you. And ditto for Navy, and ditto for Marines, and ditto for Air Force. We'll take care of it. You don't have to spend money, you Europeans. Here's what you can do with the money that you don't have to spend on defense. You can use it to give your working classes a wonderful social welfare state, as good or better than what workers in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe can afford to give themselves. And that way we'll defeat communism. We will make Western Europe a consumer wonderland. Good salaries, good private incomes, and massive government-supported public services. I'm going to give you just two examples, which I take from current-day France. If you graduate from high school or college in France today, and you enter the labor force, as everybody does sooner or later, your employer, whether you're 20 years old or 30 years old or any age, your employer must give you 5 weeks of paid vacation every year. And that's been true for the last half century. Most Americans will never have that. If you're French, you're covered by a health insurance from the day you're born to the day you die. Doesn't matter whether you're working or not working, whether you have an employment contract like this or like that. It's a service given to everybody in France by right. Let me give you another example. In France, in Germany, in many other European countries, if you choose to go for higher education, beyond high school, college, university, you know what the tuition there is? Zero, nothing. The government provides that to you for free. Yup, you have to pay your room and board, but you don't pay for higher education. These are extraordinary services that have been available to Europeans for decades. If you didn't know about it, think about what that might mean. But the United States basically paid for that by providing the military cover. Of course, it was good for the United States because providing military cover is a polite way of saying taxing the American people and giving that money to the military producers of the guns and the tanks and the missiles and all the rest of it. So it was a support for our economy, the military, very big in our society, much bigger than anything else in the world, which it has to be if you're going to be the national, international military power. Okay, why am I telling you this? Because that has all changed now. The Soviet Union is gone. Russia is a capitalist society and says so proudly. Mr. Putin says it over and over again. So the Soviet Union is gone. And the socialist and communist movements inside Europe are much, much weaker than they were in 1945. There is no comparable danger of the way it was then. And so the United States is looking at a totally different situation. But number two, and even more important, the United States is much weaker than it was in 1945. It's not the only economic power. In fact, it has already been equaled and is in the process of being surpassed by China and its allies, who are now a bigger, richer economic force than the United States is. It is freaking the United States out that this is the reality. Do our leaders talk to us about it? No. They pretend it isn't there. The BRICS is nothing, Mr. Trump said a few weeks ago. He wishes it ain't so. China and the BRICS now are a bigger economic bloc than the United States and the G7. But even more important, China and the BRICS, it's about 55 to 60% of the world's population. The United States is 4.5% of the world's population. You can't overcome that, no matter how many missiles you've got. It won't work. And the United States knows it. Mr. Trump and his advisors know it. Mr. Biden and his do too. They ought to be squaring with us, and we talk about what do we do in this situation. But no, we practice denial in the United States. We claim to be the top of the hill as if it were 1965. It isn't. It's over what we had then, as anyone then would have understood. You don't stay in that unique position. No country ever has. Every other empire has had its ups and then has gone down. We are now in the down phase. And you know how the desperation shows? Well, in Mr. Trump's case, it is by turning on your allies. You're so desperate, you cut off your relationship with Canada and Mexico. Look at it. You cut off your relationship with Western Europe. Look at it. You're desperate. And in your desperation, you're actually becoming weaker, which is also not unusual. We live at a crucial historical moment. But listening to Mr. Trump is a little like what you used to hear from Mr. Biden. Make-believe, denial, assertions, but no honest confrontation with the realities that are screaming for attention before we all go down because we haven't solved them. If interventions like this strike you as useful, please share them with friends, neighbors, relatives, co-workers. That's why we produce them, to give us a better, richer, more honest national conversation than we would otherwise have. And of course, if you can contribute something to help defray the costs of producing and distributing these videos, that would be enormously appreciated as well. Thank you.